Over the top of Walker. Hamilton, they've done it in the nick of time. York United are back on terms with 90 seconds to play. Fine penalty. And the narrative takes another twist in the capital.
Here's Warshevsky, he's through the legs of Kalailat, and Cavalry strike first in Hamilton.
Wrights waiting for the delivery. Mabuli! Mo Mabuli, magnificent from the York United captain. Incredible stuff in Ottawa. We're all tied up at 2-2 in the quarterfinal.
The North Star Cup will be hoisted in Calgary, Alberta. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. speaks of the dragon to be slayed. They do it today in Hamilton.
If he scores, Ottawa win. Iliadis. He's done it. Iliadis. Atlético Ottawa advance into the semi-finals of the Canadian Premier League playoffs.
Man, that was a crazy day yesterday. Welcome back to another playoff edition of the CPL Newsroom presented by Volkswagen. Charlie O'Connor-Clarke with Mitchell Tierney as we take you through a Super Sunday in the CPL playoffs, a qualifying semifinal at Tim Hortons Field, and a quarterfinal at TD Place. Mitch, this was I think all we wanted it to be and more. This day on Sunday, we saw Cavalry winning at Tim Hortons Field in their qualifying semifinal to host the 2024 CPL Final 2 weeks from now in Calgary. And earlier that afternoon, we had an absolute classic in Ottawa, where Atlético Ottawa beat York United on penalties after both teams scored in extra time, ended 2-2 and then 5-4 on pens. So Atlético Ottawa headed to the Hammer next weekend for that last semifinal to see which team is going to meet Forge in the final on November 9th. We're going to start in Hamilton, though, with that game, Mitch, because it was a lot of fun this qualifying semifinal. Only a 1-0 game, we have to say, but I think for me, in some ways, a masterclass from Cavalry in how to win a playoff game, and not something that they've necessarily had been able to provide a masterclass in before. But they come here to Tim Hortons Field incredibly motivated. They come in with the memory of last year's final in the back of their mind, and they come in and they win. Mitchell, what impressed you about Cavalry and their slaying of the dragon here in Hamilton?
Yeah, I mean, a slightly weird Forge Cavalry match where I think the first booking was in the 95th minute.
Yeah.
We don't usually see that between these two teams, so maybe that was the only thing that this game lacked overall. But I think, like you said, like the ability. I mean, we've seen them. I think it's 4 of the past 5 games, and if you want to include that CPL final from a year ago, in that where Cavalry's taken the lead. Going into or playing against Forge, and they've only held on once in all those times. Like Forge seems to just have their number, always be able to get back in games, and yeah, I think that it's really impressive, the ability to hold on against a Forge team that we know absolutely knows what they can do in the playoffs, and that defensive solidity has really been just the difference maker for this Cavalry team all year. And it's especially so in the playoffs where that matters, even more, where, you can't draw games. Someone's got to win eventually. So the longer you can go with keeping the other team off the board, like the better chance you kind of have to win. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot to like about the way this Cavalry team defended and the way they're able to, slay the dragons of the past. We weren't burying any ghosts this year. It was dragons being slayed. I think there's improvements that have been made in the metaphor game as well, which is something that
100%.
That can't go overlooked on the Cavalry side of thing. So yeah, I think all around, a historic day for Cavalry Football Club. I know, if they obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves, but if they go on and lose the final, I don't think that this will be, the monumental moment that it could be. But nevertheless, beating Forge in the playoffs is something they had to do eventually as a club, and to do it like this is big.
As we said on this very podcast last year, you cannot bury ghosts, and that is why Cavalry failed to do so last year. But yeah, slaying the dragon.
It was flawed from the start. They had no chance.
It was exactly. Exactly. If that's your plan, then it's a losing battle. Anyway, this was the 8th time Forge and Cavalry have met in the Canadian Premier League playoffs. Cavalry had not won any of them until yesterday. And let's just kind of go through how this game went, because it's pretty back and forth in the first 20 minutes. Maybe Forge have a couple of the better chances, but Toby Warshevsky, every time the ball comes to him, seems to be making something happen. You know, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. joked that he was the front three yesterday for Cavalry. He was kind of all over the place in their press, especially, but they love to hit those balls up to him and have him kind of take on defenders and maybe absorb some pressure towards himself, look for an outlet past Ali Musi, or maybe just beat them himself. And then finally, just before the half-hour mark, it is, that really, really accurate long ball up the field from Marco Carducci into the wind, by the way. That's a really difficult pass to make. Warshevsky brings it down beautifully, holds off Garvin Matusala, and then steps around Jasim Kolelat to kind of slot it into the empty net. And then after that, I think it was really, Cavalry getting increasingly strong defensively. I think Forge had their chances early in the second half, and late in the first half. I think there were a couple posts they hit, but the longer the game went, the less likely it felt to me like Forge were going to score. Dan Klomp was incredible, getting every ball away. Callum Montgomery is good too, and in the air especially, I think he had 12 clearances. But Mitch, is that kind of what you saw? You saw Cavalry kind of increasingly looking like a team that we're not going to give up this game.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that one thing to point to is just the consistency of having that back line, mostly healthy. I know there's been some changes. Tom Field got injured, but Bradley Camden's played enough matches that's a pretty solid like-for-like replacement there. And, still one of the best left backs in the league. I think having Fraser Aird on the right side has been a big help for them this season, a natural right back to defend out there. And then Callum Montgomery has been, such a revelation for this team. As you mentioned, 12 clearances. He won pretty much everything that Forge tried to play in the air into the Cavalry box. And, we don't have to wax anymore about Dan Klomp. Everyone knows, I think, at this point, how we feel about him in this league and on this show. But having the overall lineup consistency they've had this season, but I think having a back four that has this much familiarity with each other and has been able to play with each other as much as they have this season is really why in these moments where you need them to be solid and you need them to not give up chances, they're able to. And I think that's a significant, thing that's been huge for Cavalry this year.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Bradley Camden there. He is a Cavalry player that I caught up with after the match and just on the pitch after the final whistle to get some of that emotion. So I think let's go back to Tim Hortons Field for a second to hear what Bradley had to say.
Post-game reaction brought to you by Allstate alongside Cavalry FC's Bradley Camden. You are hosting the CPL Final this year. How excited are you guys for 2 weeks from now?
Oh, I'm so excited because we get to have the final at home. We have, for me, the best fans in the league, and we have an amazing place at Atlético Field. So, yeah, it's what we worked for all season, and we have one more game.
Tell me about this game, beating Forge at Tim Hortons Field, something that's been difficult for you guys, but you guys put in a hell of a performance. So tell me what went right for you.
Yeah, it's special. I think today was a show. It showed what we've done all year, which is stay resilient and never give up. We had a year with a lot of injuries. We had to go through adversity, and today was the same. We knew everything. We knew that we had to count on each other and stay together, and I think that's what we did. We got the goal, and then we fought together. Everybody was on the same page, and that's why we got the win.
Yeah, you speak about the resilience. Tell me about that second half effort to kind of weather the storm and just not let them through.
Yeah, we still try to play, but away it's not always easy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think we show the heart, we show commitment, we show solidarity, and that's at the end why we got the result.
Just lastly, I want to ask you about Toby. What's it like playing with a guy like him, where you see him bring the ball down like that, and you think the ball's going in the net?
It's unbelievable. He has so much quality. Sometimes you give him difficult balls, and you just kind of hope. And today, again, I think he shows it day in, day out at training. In the game, he's a fantastic player. And especially as a defender, it's good to be able to have such quality up front. And there's Toby, there's Sergio, there's Musi. We have Nicolas coming in as well. We have a lot of Malcolm came in. We have a lot of quality, a lot of injured players as well, which yeah, it obviously definitely helps us.
We'll see Cavalry FC again in 2 weeks at Atco Field on November 9th in the CPL Final. We'll find out next week if they'll be playing Forge FC or Atlético Ottawa.
Yeah, and shout out Toby Warshevsky. I don't think I've seen a lot of players in the Canadian Premier League go on this kind of run of form at this kind of important juncture. You know, he's got 6 goals in 4 games. He ripped the golden boot out of Ruben Del Campo's hands last week, and this week he is propelling his team into the final. One of the most entertaining players to watch in the league. So effective, such a nightmare for a defender. You know, he's right on you whenever you're trying to play out of the back. And impressive how he's kind of settled into this Cavalry team, given that he hadn't really played any football in 18 months by the time he got there. You know, his last professional game had been with FC Edmonton. But you know, anyway, a lot of smiles in the Cavalry camp after this game. Tommy Wheeldon Jr., we also heard from him. He said that he had known they were going to win before this game, his press conference. Didn't give us the receipts that Benjamin Moore gave us.
No text.
We didn't see any text calling for a 1-0 win with a Warshevsky goal. But you know, I do believe him. But here's what the Cavalry manager had to say about what exactly was their key to success in this game.
Do you know what? It's interesting. We went in there. There was no locker room pictures, no big things for social media. It was just like, great. This is a great performance. Well done. They're proud of each other, but they're focused on doing something we've not yet done yet, and we're right there on the doorstep of it. But we know whoever we face, whether it be Forge or Ottawa, it's going to be a tough game, right? So we know we can't take this too lightly. We've made it easy for ourselves now. It's now 50-50, right? And we've got to use the advantages of our home field in front of our crowd. And the preparation, and they know there's work to do, and I love that about them. They're still hungry.
And the luxury for Cavalry is they get to train on that grass for the next 2 weeks. They'll be in that climate. I think it might be a cold one in Ottawa in 2 weeks. So Mitch, we're gonna have to make sure we've got some winter coats ready to go. But you know, I honestly wouldn't hate a snowy CPL final. I'll just say that.
No,
I wouldn't hate it.
It'd be pretty cool.
Because
we would be cool in it.
Yeah, I wouldn't really want to play on that, you know, the hard grass. But we'll see what happens. It could be a really, really special day in Calgary. I'm sure it will be, no matter what is the situation. Anyway, we will probably get back to Calgary a little bit later, but for now, let's talk about Forge quickly, Mitch. As far as I can tell, it's the second time in club history they've lost 3 times in a row. That was, you know, 3 league games in the middle of the campaign last year, where they also were held goalless by, I think, Pacific Valor and Vancouver FC. But this one feels like it's coming in not exactly at the time you want to be slumping. Now, you might say that the last 2 games of the regular season, the loss to Ottawa, the loss to Pacific, not quite as concerning if you're Forge, if you're Bobby Smirniotis, because, again, they'd already clinched the CPL Shield. Those games were not necessarily as important for them as they were for their opponent in either case. But this one was. Forge are disappointed that they're not going to be hosting the final. And they have not scored a goal for the last 3 games. Mitch, what did you make of Forge's performance in this game, and what would your level of concern be?
I'm never gonna say concern about a Forge team at this stage in the season where they're still alive, because I've seen enough to to know that they always make you pay for saying that. But I would say I was surprised, because I think in our heart of hearts we all thought that, you know, end of the regular season happens, it's playoffs, and Forge just go in full force. They're clinical, they score a few goals, and you know, we completely forget that they lost the last 2 games of the regular season, as we have over the past, you know, 5 years. You know, they certainly created some good chances and had good opportunities to score, but you know, obviously they didn't. And you know, I think that it wasn't maybe a vintage Forge performance. You know, I thought Tristan Borges, who, you know, is a player who could be the player of the league or player of the year in the Canadian Premier League, you know, was a little bit quiet, very frustrated at times. Cavalry did a good job of not getting him onto the ball. I don't know, you know, Nana Ampoma showed some good things, but I thought too often, you know, they're playing the ball into the box to him and there's no one around him, which is, I know, something Forge love, is to have numbers in the box consistently. And when they did, you know, be that the Kyle Becker header, the Hojabrapor chance, you know, they had their good chances, but I thought that they got kept to the perimeter a little too often in this game. So, if you're Forge, you're not overly concerned because you did a lot of good things in this game, but at the same time, you have to take this as a massive wake-up call and be like, okay, if we put in another performance like this, we're going to miss CPL finals for the first time in club history. There's an Ottawa team that's going to come in heavily motivated to beat us. So yeah, I think it's a wake-up call more than anything for this Forge team, and we'll see how they reply next weekend.
Yeah, an Ottawa team that's not only motivated to beat them, but has done it multiple times this year. Yeah, I think it was a bit of a frustrating one for Forge. They had some chances that really could have gone and hit the post. I think maybe hit the post multiple times, and a couple of those distance shots that I think you'd sometimes expect to go in. You mentioned Nana Ampoma. I think that he's a very, very good player, but not quite a natural striker. And I think for me, this is one of the first times, really since Kwesi Poku left, that that has been quite noticeable that Forge didn't quite have an out and out center forward. I think the fitness of Victor Klonarides might change their fortunes heading into the next game a lot, but it did seem like they didn't have somebody with that striker's instinct that's going to turn to goal and shoot, because I think Ampoma is a little bit more of a winger who needs to be out there. So I think it was a bit of a concern for Forge in this game. But anyway, we will get more into their chances against Atlético Ottawa in a little bit. But I do think we need to hear from Bobby Smirniotis, who was, I think, quite frustrated after this one. So let's see what he had to say.
Yeah, we put the ball in the right spot around the goal. It's a tough question to answer because the opportunities were there, chances were there, clear chances were there, and yeah, most days they go in. On the days they don't, this could be the outcome. So, it's what I told the guys. I thought although in the first half we weren't our best, we created 3 very good opportunities. We've given up a pretty uncharacteristic goal there, but in the second half we've reacted well. And it's not just chances; it's clear chances to goal from quality players in and around the box, and it wasn't there. And when it's not there, that's the result. And then it's the path to success isn't always linear. So we're obviously used to doing it one way. Now you do it a little bit differently, right? And that's all it is. It's one game, and we obviously wanted to work out differently. But can't blame the guys for their effort, especially in that second half.
And we will obviously see Forge again at Tim Hortons Field next week on Saturday. They take on Atlético Ottawa at 4 o'clock Eastern Time in the second semi-final. And we will see which of those two sides meets Cavalry FC at Atco Field. But we have spoken about this game, I think, enough. We need to get on to the absolute classic we saw at TD Place in Ottawa. Atlético Ottawa, as you mentioned, 2, York United 2, and Ottawa winning 5-4 on penalties. We're going to bring in a special guest here who was on the ground in Ottawa, Mr. Kristian Jack. Kristian, good to see you. I think we want to start with you here. It is a great morning. I think we want to start with you here because it was a really, really entertaining game to watch from the press box at Tim Hortons Field. But it must have been a little bit more fun to be on the ground. What was it like being in Ottawa for this match?
Yeah, wild one. Great to see you boys. Great day for the league, and obviously not a great day for York United, but I think both teams understood the message heading into the game about how to build a game up in the magnitude that they did, and they both executed that. And sometimes when the game starts, it all goes a bit flat, right? With the build-up and the war of words and all the stories around it. But this one lived up to the billing and then some, right? It wasn't a great first half, but pretty soon afterwards, we had an electric game. I think the game always needed a goal. It led to an open game after it. My thought when Bassett scored, to be honest, was that it was probably going to be it. Traditionally, you guys saw it in Hamilton. The history in Canadian Premier League playoffs is if you score first, most of the time you're going to win. In fact, I think Forge are the only team who haven't done that last year in the 2023 final. But Gmo, the kid, gets the goal in the 94th minute in the first 90 minutes. Then literally in the first 20 seconds, Ottawa get a penalty. Del Campo, I thought, was excellent in the game. scores it, and then Babuli goes the other way and we get the penalties. So it was wild. It was great. The crowd were really into it, but it was just a tremendous game of football where both teams, I think, really wanted to win, and that's what opened it up with that Bassett goal at the beginning of the half. In the second half, I think it would have been a bit more of a quieter game and tense. But once we got that goal, York really went at it, and in the end, it came down to the big penalty shot at the end, and Babuli missing the one, and then Iliadis getting the goal at the end to fire them through. So yeah, lots to make of it, guys. I'm interested to know what you thought, but in the end, I think the overriding emotion for me was just how much that team needed this, not only for this year, but for the history of the team going forward.
Yeah, it was a fascinating game. I think signature moments for both clubs on both sides, and that's what makes it so memorable. I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised that it was Ottawa walking away from this one. It felt like a lot of the momentum was with York. It felt like the psychological advantage was with York going into the game, and it felt like they'd restored that when they score right at the end of the 90 minutes. I thought they would probably go and find a way to win in the extra time, but I think it was impressive from Ottawa to be able to kind of recover from that. Obviously, they are able to score so early in extra time with the penalty, kind of a mistake to give that away so early. But I think it was impressive with Atlético Ottawa. Mitch, you were covering this game for us as well. Just what did you make of it? And do you think that Atlético Ottawa are the team that ultimately should have gone through?
I think so. And again, I agree with you. Like, we knew all the pressure was on them going into this game, and I actually thought they dealt with that quite well through the first stages of the game. They get their goal, they take the lead, and then if this is a regular season game, everyone is leaving TD Place Stadium absolutely fuming because they switch off in the last moment again and allow a late goal. And that has to be in the back of their mind, is how many times have they done this over the past 2 seasons, that it's kind of been their story really. But they're able to turn around. They get the goal in extra time, and then obviously York reply again. And going into the penalty shootout, you think all the pressure's on them. York's shooting first, which makes it statistically more likely that York's going to win. So the pressure is even more on them. And then they go out and smash 5 perfect penalties. Starting with Didic, who just powers one into the top corner, and you're like, okay, they're going to be great. So to get over that mental hurdle, I think was pretty significant for them. And, again, I think they did deserve it because they were the better team on the day. They had the better chances. They controlled the match really well. But again, there's going to be lessons for them from this game, because you do this against the Forged Cavalry, and I don't think you get the second chance to save yourselves. I think that, they would, they're going to end your season.
Yeah, I think you're right to mention how good 9 of those 10 penalties were. A lot of them were placed really well in the corners by the post, and maybe surprisingly, the only one that is really quite a poor penalty was Babuli's. But Mitch, we talked about Cavalry changing a narrative in their game. As you mentioned, this is kind of Ottawa changing a narrative of not being the team that gives away points. I mean, if it was a regular season game, they had given away points late. They did concede an equalizer from a winning position, but then they do go on. They find a way to get the result they need to go through, which is maybe not something that they've always been able to do as a club. They've conceded a lot of those goals, but I think all smiles in the Ottawa dressing room at the moment. Certainly after the game, we're going to roll through lots of reaction from Ottawa. Kristian, you caught up with Ollie Bassett after the game on the pitch, so let's go back and hear what Atlético Ottawa's midfielder had to say.
Kristian Jack alongside Ollie Bassett. Post-game reaction brought to you Allstate by Allstate. What a game this was. CPL Classic, first ever penalty shootout. You're on the bench for it. It just happened. What's your overall thoughts?
Yeah, crazy game. I think we were a minute away from winning it in normal time, and then it goes to extra time. We score early and then concede 2 minutes later, and then it goes to penalties. It's a nice way to win, but a horrible way to lose.
Yeah.
When it goes to that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think the boys dug deep in extra time, and yeah, I mean it's a jackpot at the end of the day, and we were just lucky to come out on the right end of it.
Lots to dissect. Let's go chronological. You get your goal. It looked like corners were always a problem for York. Did it seem like that was a bit of a game plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think first 10-15 we just tried to get in behind them and put them under pressure, win free kicks and corners, and essentially just put the ball into good areas. And I thought we did that a few times before we actually scored, and then the goal was maybe a bit fortunate to go in, but I'm just trying to put it in an area, and then it causes problems. So the goal obviously happened like that, and then the rest is history.
You get taken off right before the end to a standing ovation. They're all chanting your name. You think you've won, and then they score right before extra time. As a professional, how hard is that to then watch a team play another game and then a shootout when you're not involved?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think coming off and then conceding straight away, and then not being able to impact and have an effect on the game from there on out. It's obviously, it's a weird feeling, but you just have to trust your teammates and the 11 guys that are still on the field. And I thought we could have won it in extra time. To be fair, we could have won it in normal time.
Yeah.
We had a few chances before they actually equalised. But I think they dug deep in the end, and if we couldn't win it, we just didn't want to concede and give away a stupid goal. We took its penalties, and then Nate came up big for us, and we're through.
Yeah, the penalties were tremendous, as was your goalie. Ollie, put this into perspective for me. Last question. It's almost 2 years to the day you played a final here and you got beat by Forge. You haven't won a playoff game here since. To get through here, obviously you guys have aspirations of winning a cup in front of your big, passionate home fan base. How big is this for not just today, but for the entire team, the club going forward?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think, over the course of the last 3 years, I think we've actually been better away from home.
Yeah.
So to get through this today and win in front of the fans and, give them something to cheer about, I think it's huge for us, and it obviously means a lot to everyone that came out here today. And then, we have another game next weekend away from home, and, I think the way we play kind of suits, being on the road. We'll get ready for that, and, we'll see how far we can go.
We'll see you there next week for the semi-final. Thanks, Ollie. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
It was quite the turn of events when Ollie Bassett comes off the pitch, York score, and it looks like this game could end up heading to penalties, and they've just taken off one of their top penalty kick takers. I think the prevailing thought in a lot of Ottawa fans' minds was going to be uh-oh, but as we mentioned, they did find a way, and Carlos Gonzalez, their coach, very, very happy, I think, with that result as well. And we also obviously heard from him in the press conference, and here's what the manager had to say about this win.
An epic night, a night to remember. I think this is playoffs, emotions everywhere, and hopefully we go through. I think that we did a pretty good game until the 94th minute, in which we lose the control in the last action. But we can be very proud of the work of the team, the composure that the players showed in. Although we had a little bit of roller coaster, the composure of the players, I think, is very important to be stable, to control the emotions in this type of games.
Now we're obviously going to speak a little bit more about Atlético Ottawa in a few minutes when we preview that semi-final next weekend, but I want to get you guys' thoughts on York here, because the road ends for them. Won the first playoff game in club history on Wednesday night. We were all there. This one, they take it right down to the very, very last possible instance. Kristian, we'll start with you. Just what did you think of York, not just in this game, but in these two playoff games they played as a whole?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to grow on. As ever, as an off-season starts, you never know what's going to happen, right? With coaching, players, turnover. I think it starts with 16-year-old Shola Jimo, who gets a goal and assist in an enormous game. I saw him after the game briefly, had a little bit of a word with him. He was obviously very disappointed. I just think he's got that mental edge over a lot of athletes at that age. He's just got a switch already that he knows what he needs to do and where he needs to be. And I think he's going to be really special. So hopefully they can build around him and keep hold of him for a little bit and have him develop. It starts with him for me. Some question marks on some of the choices. Obviously, Brian Wright getting 15 minutes and then an extra 30. That was always a bit mystifying. Benjamin always said that it was just tactical. There's never any injury there. So we'll find out eventually what happened there, I suppose. I thought you could be a little bit critical of their approach yesterday if it was a singular match based on its own. Like, they didn't look like a team that went out for the jugular right away against a nervous home team. But Mitch, I suppose I'll come to you. You kind of covered it too. Like, at the end of the day, that they picked the same 11, after playing a big game 4 days earlier, which was a big shock. But he decided to do that to keep the momentum. And I suppose if you're going to do that, you're going to have that edge, but you're also going to have a little bit of a physical draining. And they look like that. And then having to play another 30 minutes on top of it. They almost got over the line with all that being said. So I suppose it was natural that they were chasing the ball a lot against a team like in Ottawa that don't always dominate possession.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a story of what's been York's success this season is, I think really it's mentality more than anything. Like, this is a team that believes they can win. They have that belief that, they're never done, they're never out of it. And, even when maybe it hasn't been their best day and their performance hasn't been, up to certainly Ottawa's standards, they're able to, keep fighting and obviously get back into the game twice, which was incredible considering how much football, as you mentioned, they'd played, and many of these players had played over the past few games. And, we saw them, as Oswaldo Leon goes down in the final moments of the game. There's multiple players who have to be taken off or who are cramping, but to be able to fight through the way they did was impressive. And again, just a credit to the mentality that this team has built and the belief that they now have that, they can go toe to toe with these teams. I do think it's a point well made on Brian Wright, because they really were lacking any sort of reference up top. Like, Babuli and Selanovic are very good players, but, when you need a player to take you out of pressure, one of the best hold-up strikers in the Canadian Premier League would have been pretty helpful on the day, and a player who, knows how to score at TD Place Stadium. So I thought that was a bit of a miss, but overall, you just have to be impressed by how much this team bought in under Benjamin Mora and how far that took them this season.
I think it was a bit of a strange game. I don't think you ever really expect to concede in the way they did, with the ball coming in from the corner, just kind of bouncing off your goalkeeper's stomach and in. It's kind of a weird one, and not necessarily one you'd expect to concede. But I think York, for me, I come out of this York season feeling more like it's the beginning of something at this club. It felt like a very, very positive year for them, where there was a lot of change at the club last off season. We spoke about them, I think, on Thursday after that playoff game they won. Just so much feels different about the club this year. I think there's a lot of optimism. But to put a bow on their season, let's go back to TD Place one more time, because Benjamin Mora gave his final thoughts on their 2024 campaign.
I don't know, my friend. I just spoke to them and I asked them, how do you do it? How do you do it? It's the 130 minutes for some players. Niall Higgins, he was with an overload in his abductor since yesterday. How can he play 130 minutes like he played? I don't know. We got Oswaldo injured, his hamstring, unfortunately because of the same reasons. But they find the strength somewhere. It shows that when you want things, it's like an instinct of flight or fly, right? Mode, that they just go in survival mode and they just wanna take it, right? So I don't know. I'm proud of them. You can't find this so easy. You can't provoke this so easy. Many coaches, many teams fail on that task, and we succeeded. So yeah, it's good to see that.
It's also good to see that this game was billed as such an exciting rivalry clash between two teams that didn't seem to like each other, and it was, all that and more. It was just so much fun. And I'm ashamed to be saying goodbye to this game, but we're not saying goodbye to Atlético Ottawa just yet. I want to get into next week's semi-final, because we have one team in a CPL final, and we don't know who the other one is. Obviously, Forge hosting Ottawa on November 2nd at 4:00 Eastern Time. Kristian, let's come to you first. Just what is your initial thought looking at this matchup, and where do you think the advantage is?
I think the advantage is obviously with the home team. They have I think a considerable advantage. They're being the favorites. They rarely lose 4 games in a row. They rarely lose at Tim Hortons Field. They have the best home record this season. And they're used to playing in big games and getting it done, right? We may be a little bit affected by the recent evidence of what's happened. And I think we're right to bring up some concerns that they've had. Conversion of chances, striker, who's going to play as number 9. Para being, I think, a real tactical miss for this team in width. So, but I do think it starts with them, no matter what. And I think it's, on the other aspect, suits Atlético Ottawa a little bit that it does start with Forge. because watching the game yesterday, I thought if they have to go to Calgary to play the semi-final, you could almost make a case that it would have been a 50-50 game. Ottawa's record against Cavalry, an open match, but you can't make that example now. So I think that Atlético Ottawa, despite of all the pressure that was on them in this game yesterday, despite all of what happened in the offseason, despite all these superstars coming in, suddenly now going to a semi-final, and they can play the role of a little bit now, like it's flipped, right? They were called Goliath before, and now they can go, well, no, hold on. Like, we've had this great record against Forge to be quietly confident, but there is no doubt about it that the pressure is on Forge, and the expectation is that they're going to win the game and go to the final.
Yeah, Mitch, I guess just ask if you agreed. I think it might be a more battle-hardened Atlético Ottawa coming out of a playoff victory. They've kind of gotten back on the horse, so to speak, in that sense. But Mitch, if you're Atlético Ottawa coming into this game, do you agree that the pressure is on Forge?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, they'll be confident coming in, but something Carlos Gonzalez said in the lead up to the York game that still applies is, you can throw the regular season record between York and Ottawa out the window. Obviously, York having beaten them 3 times, and then Ottawa go out and beat York in the playoffs. And, he said, same thing, us going into, if we go into Hamilton and play Forge, you think they're going to care that we beat them 3 times during the regular season? And, if you look at the context of some of those games, obviously they're coming off, one of them meant very little to Forge. They're going to lift a trophy at the end. The other one's coming off a Canadian championship. But yeah, so I think that's certainly something that I think Atlético Ottawa can be like, okay, we're confident, but we know we're not the pressure team. But obviously there was a lot of hype surrounding the Ottawa York game, but I think that we know there's bad blood between these two teams as well. I mean, you mentioned the Parra suspension. Obviously, that happened in a game against Atlético Ottawa. Luke Singh was suspended in the same game for somewhat similar incident. Jabrapor got sent off. Like, this is a game where maybe on the field more than off the field, the way York Ottawa was. There's some bad blood between these two teams. So I think that will make this another exciting game. And again, both teams, even if there isn't the same expectations on Atlético Ottawa, they're going to want to reach at least a final this year to prove that their offseason project was successful. I know they're building for the future as well, but they're going to want those recent results. So this is a really, really exciting semifinal. And I think, yeah, it just makes for another classic clash.
Absolutely. And I mean, worth pointing out that whichever one of these teams wins, I think, is going to get that suspended player back for the final.
Yeah.
So Forge could probably have, if they win, they could have Daniel Parra back on that left side, and that suddenly changes their matchup with Cavalry a lot more. And Ottawa would obviously love to have Luke Singh back as well. But Kristian, we've spoken about whether or not they can beat Forge in Hamilton. What do Atlético Ottawa need to do in this game for that to happen?
Well, I think the last few weeks they've been good. And I know what I mean. What I mean by that is you're still always frustrated in the conversion of chances. And I don't think for a team that well equipped, they probably score enough goals. But I think that when you do the analysis on this team and you look at the numbers and the eye test, I think there's certain aspects of the team that is, I think, turned around a little bit. And it starts for me with work rate and defensive capabilities from the front. And that's really the only position that Carlos Gonzalez has been asked about who's playing there, right? I think we now know we can pick the team next week, right? We know Ingham, despite battling with Yesley earlier season, undisputed number 1, right? We know what the back 3 is going to be like. Singh's not playing. It's Walker, it's Didic, it's Delamo, and I like the balance of that, right? The fullbacks, I think, have been excellent. Mora and Debrian, I thought, was very, very good against York. They bring real width and they can get forward, but their defensive one-on-ones in duels and the tenacity and the physicality that they bring. And then the midfield's working, right? Sissoko brings a little bit more legs than Zapatero, who can come on if you win in a game later. They've got Aparicio and Bassett in the half spaces. And so we know that model in which Carlos Gonzalez has played the system for a reason to get the best out of those players, in particular, Ollie Bassett, is working. Bassett was excellent against York as well. And then the front 2, I end with them because I think they're the most important. We've seen different versions in all 3 games. We've seen Salter and Tabla, right? We've seen Salter and Del Campo, and we've seen Del Campo and Tabla. But that game yesterday, he didn't take them 2 off until a Tabla came off in the 86th minute. And if you do a deep dive, Carlos Gonzalez always removes one of his strikers earlier than that. That says everything that what I was watching, the work rate from the front that those 2 put in. pressing, defensive, without the ball, consistently hounding York's team as they try to play up from the back, getting on Elijah Adekubi, which they knew was a really important part of it. I thought Del Campo was great, and I know Mitchell called him the player of the match for a reason. I thought he was excellent, but Tabla showed that work rate too. So, Mitch, I guess I'll come to you. With them two, they've got to do the same with Forge. Forge are going to have a lot of the ball. They've got to hunt and they've got to work. And I think that if them two are able to do that, what you've got is when you turn it over and when you've got the ball, you've got people who can finish. You've got Del Campo in a good headspace. Tabla can finish Bassett. We know they've got players if they can get in those positions. So that makes them dangerous for me.
Yeah, for sure. We know, especially at home, Forge is going to be the club that wants to hold the most of the ball and build out of the back and all those things they usually do at Tim Hortons Field. So absolutely. I mean, Del Campo, very similar in some ways to Tobias Warshevsky, a player who obviously costs Forge, is someone who's never stops working up top, and you always have to worry about him because he's a front three of his own sometimes for Atlético Ottawa, and the way he tracks and moves and creates chances for others and himself. So yeah, and then when you have, obviously we've been waiting all season for the offensive Balou Tabla to come through, but like you said, that was one of his best matches in terms of his work rate and what he was able to create in that game. And if he scores that one on Vincencini late in the game, he's the hero really for Atlético Ottawa in this game. So there's a lot to like about their front two going into this game. And like you said, just the consistency of lineup they've been able to find, which is so important at this time of year.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Warshevsky comparison is important just based on how effective he was against Forge. But Mitch, we'll wrap up on this game by asking you just about Forge again. Maybe haven't been quite at their best the last few weeks. What would it look like if they are at their best and they do come out of this game as the winners?
They have to score. That much is obvious, but I think it's almost the counterpoint to Atlético Ottawa. Like, we can pick Atlético Ottawa's 11 almost perfectly. I don't know what Forge are going to do in this game, and it's the same area of the pitch up front. I'm not sure. Obviously Borges has been probably their best player this season, but the ability of Jensen and Becker late in this season, how do you not start a Noah Jensen? Like, you have to think about that. Who do you start at that center forward position? They haven't been able to find a player who's been all that good up there. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of questions about them. They have to find a system that really works. And, again, they have to find someone who's going to put the ball in the back of the net. We know they're going to create chances regardless of who they're going to play against, but someone has to be confident to be that player in the big moment to take them over the line. And obviously, we've seen that time and time again from this Forge team. So again, that's why I wouldn't raise any alarm bells yet. But there are like, in terms of the question marks between the two teams, there's a lot more about how Forge are going to approach this game than there are about Atlético Ottawa.
Absolutely. But it should be another entertaining playoff match where maybe the stakes are a little bit higher for Forge, knowing that there is no tomorrow. You win or you go home. Obviously, next Saturday at Tim Hortons Field, as we mentioned, 4:00 Eastern. Get your tickets or watch on OneSoccer, obviously. Kristian, just the last thing I want to ask you about. We spoke about Cavalry at the top of the show a lot, but I wanted to get your thoughts on them because obviously, we've been following them for so long. This felt like a really, really huge moment for them as a club, kind of an emotional moment for them to get this win at Tim Hortons Field. Just what do you think of them, and just how does this change their outlook going into a final?
Yeah, we wrapped up in Ottawa, got all our content done, walked over to a restaurant and watched the game, and a few Ottawa players were in there with us, and they kept an eye on it too. And for me, watching the Cavalry team defend, I thought was really impressive. There was a time where they could have been 2 or 3 up in the second half. I know Bobby Sminiotis quite rightly said they had their chances as well, but I think of the Wielden chance that could have been 2-0 and he could have buried that. And then the cross by Musi and the Klomp header that looked like it was just ready for bulging in the back of the net, and they didn't put it away, but they didn't break. At that point, I think we said to a lot of people watching at the table, I think everyone was thinking the same thing, that there was this expectation that Forge were just going to score, right? Cavalry didn't get it in. They didn't score again. Oh, we all know how this ends. But they knew how it ended, and they knew they had to write a different script, and they knew they had to be different. And I thought that the tactical game plan was on point. And the way they defended with belief that they knew they were going to win. And I also think that they've recognized emotional control in Forge games is crucial for them. It does not suit that team to be emotionally high and low very quickly in the roller coaster. And we talked about this the last time they went there, right? Where the penalty decision and then the questioning the referee, and they needed a game where they were just clocked and clued in and clocked in and clock out and get in and get out, a professional business trip. And they did it. And I looked at that team at the end defending that 1-0 win, and I thought, that team is completely different mindset than the team that was defending a 1-0 win in the final last year. And I know that they got beat by 2 screamers, but when Moosey scored that goal, I'll forever believe that Cavalry thought they'd won. When they scored yesterday, they didn't believe they'd won until the final whistle. And that, I thought, was the difference. And I looked at players, obviously we know they're big players, but I looked at players like Montgomery and Camden, Trafford when he came in, and that midfield 3 with Trafford and Shome and Gutierrez. And I looked at that team at the end and I thought, that's a proper 11 getting over the line right there. And I didn't think that a year ago. And I think that speaks a lot to that team and the mentality. And sometimes you've got to learn how to lose properly and hard and go through the pain to come through. Now, they believe that this is not the end, right? I saw Tommy Wheeldon Jr.'s quote, one more game. This doesn't mean anything if they don't win the final. But right now, as our job is to analyze that game, I thought there was a noticeable difference in the shift of mentality and talent.
Absolutely. I fully agree. I think I said earlier that it felt like they got better defensively as the game got on, and they could kind of smell that finish line coming a little bit closer. They locked in rather than assuming it was there. And I think something that is impressing me about Cavalry now going into the playoffs, compared to last year where they won the league by 13 points, is they are a little bit more battle hardened. They've had to fight for it a bit more this year. They spent the first half of the season, I think, really outside the playoff picture. And Tommy Wheeldon Jr. mentioned it before the match that he thinks this is the first year in CPL history that Cavalry have never been first, not even once all year. And it has been a difficult season for them. So the fact that they've been playing higher stakes games in the last half of the year and been fighting for it, I think has made them more prepared for where they are now. And it certainly would be a daunting task to walk into Atco Field 2 weeks from now. It might be really cold. They'll have had 2 weeks off training on that pitch. I think whoever they're playing, even if it is Forge again, I might have the advantage with Cavalry for this one. But anyway, that's 2 weeks from now on November 9th. Very, very excited for that one, but also excited for next week's semifinal. We'll be back with you after that one. Thank you very, very much for watching or listening along on the CPL Newsroom presented by Volkswagen as always, and we will see you very, very shortly.
Hurl it into the penalty area, over the top of Walker. They've got it in the nick of time. York United are back on terms with 90 seconds to play. Fine penalty, and the narrative takes another twist in the capital.
Here's Warshevsky, he's through the legs of Kalailat, and Cavalry strike first in Hamilton.
Wrights waiting for the delivery. Mabuli! Mabuli, magnificent from the York United captain. Incredible stuff in Ottawa. We're all tied up at 2-2 in the quarterfinal.
The North Star Cup will be hoisted in Calgary, Alberta. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. speaks of the dragon to be slayed. They do it today in Hamilton.
If he scores, Ottawa win. Iliadis. He's done it. Iliadis. Atlético Ottawa advancing to the semi-finals of the Canadian Premier League playoffs.